Welcome to episode 28 of Building Blocks of Brendan. Today we connect with Dave Hurt, one of the founders of Verb Data. On today's episode, we go over Dave's story, how he went from working a 9 to 5 to having one of his own startups, which was a software development company developing software for large organizations, to what they're doing today, created a product-driven organization in Verb Data. What Verb does is it allows SaaS companies to better dashboard their information and their data they have. What's really interesting about our story today is really the transition on some of the big differences between having an organization where, I'm more on the consulting front, where you are the product itself and you have to go out and sell your services to people, to the other side of the coin where you're developing a product. And the big difference really is the capital expenditure in the beginning. How you have to spend the money to develop the product before you can sell it. Where on the other side of the spectrum, when you're consulting, there's really no upfront costs. So we go over some of the challenges and some of the differences Dave has faced from having a people-based startup to having a product-based startup. Along the way, we also talk about Dave's journey, how he's been working remotely for quite a big part of his career, and some of the tricks and unique skill sets he was able to develop over the years that really better prepared him to start a business during these times of COVID. Funny enough, they actually started their business online, and when COVID hit, it really didn't change much on how the product was being developed and how sales were getting done. We also hear a little bit about Dave's story and some of the interesting findings he's had over his career from being a child, mowing the lawns, being really an entrepreneur from early age, but also some of the learnings he had from being a part of a band camp where realizing that if someone can manage a group of 50 teenagers to get stuff done, you really should be able to trust your own employees to get work done when working remotely. Well, hope you guys enjoy this episode, learn a bit more about data visualization and some of the unique challenges Dave is trying to solve, as well as what's unique about really having a product-based business compared to some of these other organizations we've spoken to on the podcast.
My name is Dave Hurt. I'm the co-founder of Verb Data, and I started Verb about a year and a half ago with my co-founder Oleg Friedman to really help SaaS companies build better dashboards in their products.
And dashboarding obviously becoming more and more popular with digitization of everything and data becoming a much more common, I guess you'd say, weapon or a common asset for a lot of business individuals, not just the tech people anymore. Did you have a lot of experience within data visualization before, or was this an opportunity you saw? How did you get into that world? Because it's pretty technical typically.
Definitely. To be honest, I'm not a data scientist, right? Neither of us are. But Oleg and I, we've been working together for about 10 years now, always in the SaaS space, almost always in the e-commerce SaaS space. So we met at a company called Onesys, and we did online ordering for restaurant chains across mostly North America, but also Europe. Restaurant chains for people in the US, Applebee's, Outback, Panera, people up in Canada, Boston Pizza, Eastside Mario's, the Cara brands, all of that. And so when you ordered online from bostonpizza.com, you're actually ordering through the software that Oleg built, and I was a product manager there. All those restaurant chains, they always wanted to see their data. We had kind of two forms of managing that. One was we shipped data via an API so they could kind of pull that into their own systems. But we also had a nice, graphical kind of dashboard in the product so that restaurant managers, owners could see their performance today, yesterday, things going on in the future, that kind of stuff. That company actually sold to Living Social, which was a Groupon competitor back when daily deals were cool. So we worked there for a couple of years, did a lot in the restaurant tech on that side. But eventually Oleg and I left and we started a design and development agency. So we built SaaS applications for other companies, always had a dashboard. So we kept doing the same thing over and over. Even though you're an agency building custom software, it ended up being just the same thing. We just kept building dashboards, and it was the same, concept, just different data or different visual, like a bar chart instead of a pie chart, those types of things. Fast forward, we did a couple other e-commerce startups, successful. And then, we worked at Panera Bread headquarters, as in a kind of a entrepreneurial kind of area. So we were helping commercialize some of the software. And we learned a lot about modern data infrastructure, data practices. So, setting up a data lake, setting up data warehouses, how do you kind of transform data and be efficient about it? And so we had all that experience of all the SaaS stuff, all the building those dashboards. We got this really cool kind of cloud data infrastructure experience at Panera. and we were leaving Panera, we thought, like, how do we bring these three things together? And what have we struggled with in the past? And really what came out of that was, like, we built these dashboards. They're a huge effort for developers, but customers, sales teams want it. Product managers know that they would need to build it because customers and sales are asking for it. The developers are like, I don't want to build it because it's going to take forever. And so we came at the problem that way. Like, look, we've been between a rock and a hard place before. How do we, speed it up so it's easy to build, but also easy to maintain over time? And that's kind of where we came up with the general idea of Verb.
And why Verb? Is there any funny wordplay with that, or was it how to come up with the name?
We're not marketers. Oleg is a engineer. I'm on the product sales kind of thing. And so we just were kicking around ideas. We had a couple other just like boring, names. And it was just kind of like, you need to do something with your data. So it was kind of the verb action oriented, kind of like, let's help you do something.
That's pretty good. That makes sense. It's always interesting how the names come to be. A lot of times it's either a long story or it's even just like, hey, it sounds good and we're going to go with it. And there's a little bit of wordplay with that being an action word as well. So, but prior to kind of doing Verb and kind of working, I guess, almost in consultant-ish or entrepreneurial roles in the past, throughout your like early childhood or even like through your initial schooling, were you always working on, I guess they're called side hustles now? Were you ever doing other entrepreneurial tasks? Or was this kind of a new frontier once you had more business experience? You said, hey, I can start working for myself.
Yeah, no. So as a kid, I was the typical, mow lawns, babysit, and I liked building my bank account. I didn't think of it as entrepreneurship. I just was like, I want to go make some more money. So every night of the weekend, if I could be babysitting, I would. And I was like one of the few boys that would babysit. So that was kind of like my value prop was like, instead of a girl babysitting a bunch of boys, it was, that was my thing there. And mowing lawns, it was just like, that's just good old fashioned, what you do when you're a kid. But another thing I did that I didn't think about at the time, it sounds kind of dorky, but I was in marching band in high school and did all the jazz bands and whatever. And so we would do these trips every year. So we'd like perform at like a college bowl game in January. But you had to pay to go, right? You had to go pay for the flights, the hotels and stuff. So the band would kind of put on these fundraisers. And so you could go door to door and sell like frozen pizzas or sell cheesecakes, whatever. So anyways, my parents were like, we're not paying for you to do this. So you better get out there and sell. And so I was around the neighborhood just knocking on doors, just didn't know these people. Some of them obviously were neighbors and knocked on the door, but like, just working on my elevator pitch. I'm David. I'm in the marching band. We're going to Florida, blah, blah, blah. In a couple of years, I sold the most out of anybody. Again, I didn't think about entrepreneurship at all there. I just was like, either I wanted bigger bank account or I didn't want to spend money out of my own bank account to go do that. So anyways, that's kind of like my childhood, like business orientation. I went to school for economics. I thought I liked economics because it was not so like business administration, just felt like boring and like, all right, I'm going to do finance and I'm going to learn a little this and that. It was very broad. I enjoyed economics because there's like some history involved. There's math involved. It felt kind of like all encompassing. And then one of my first jobs out of college, I started working at Onesys, the online ordering company. And that's really where I was like, oh, you can build a company and you can create an amazing culture and help people kind of grow their careers. And also just like create great relationships with customers and clients. I saw that from Oleg, my business partner now, but the other two guys that he had started Onesys with, they were only a couple of years older than me, but I was just always really impressed and enamored with how they carried themselves, how they built the business. And I never thought about business that way before. So what I'm most interested on the entrepreneurship side, like I love building a great product. I really like digging into solving those problems. But to me, team building and building the team that creates the amazing product is really what I enjoy the most. and that's really what gets me going about entrepreneurship is building the team around the whole solution.
Yeah, and it's so important. I think that's one thing that a lot of people may not realize about entrepreneurship is that depending on what business you do, a lot of times your role is in like people management, like developing a team, developing a group of people, developing a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's always hard because it's a lot of times they're almost invisible. It's like how it's sometimes challenging to be like, how would this so-called founder or person who could be a co-founder, how are they going to deal with managing 100 people? It's not very common. Like there's no test for it really per se, but it's so important. I think that's one of the challenging things is when you look at like success stories, a lot of times people always focus on like, okay, they had a good product. But when you look in the product most of the time, it's nothing that revolutionary. It's either
Mm-hmm.
like a similar idea or there's a different execution. But it's always typically the people behind it where it's like, okay, they were able to foster a team. Like you always hear like sort of like somebody grabs one right out of school, and then that person ends up becoming great at what they do. But it's so challenging to do. And I think it's always in hindsight. It's like, oh wow, we built a great team, but in the moment, it's always so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
While you were working at the other corporate jobs and throughout your career, were you always planning, okay, one day I'm gonna have my own business or be a co-founder, or was it one of those things where just as time went on, the opportunity to start your own venture became more and more accessible or more apparent, or was it always a goal, or did it just not fall into place, but
Mm-hmm.
was it just something that started presenting itself the more experience you had?
Yeah, honestly, the first time it fell into place. So the first company I started
Mhm,
with Oleg um, was the design and development agency. So it was a consulting kind of gig,
mhm,
um, and that was I think it was really a good way to get my feet wet starting a business, especially now that I've got the experience of starting a true product business or software business, um, because the startup cost was a lot lower, right?
mhm,
You go out and you sell services and projects. You don't have like there's not a lot of upfront investment to do
mhm,
that. So that was really valuable kind of way to start and learn. So the overhead was pretty low. So that was great, and really that came out of a lot of stuff we learned in that job and a lot of the conversations I was having at that time. I had a few friends who were starting their own businesses and they were using other software agencies to build
mhm,
their MVP, their first product.
mhm,
And they were all having a bad experience, no matter what,
mhm,
how expensive the firm was, how cheap it was, even if they had software experience
mhm,
themselves, et cetera, right? It was just the way that people were approaching building these MVPs. Um, it was just not very well defined. It just didn't work. And so, this was early on in kind of the high fidelity prototyping
mhm,
world. And so we thought we could leverage that and kind of the process we had been doing at Onisys into kind of custom software. So it fell into place. Truthfully, the idea wasn't necessarily mine. It kind of came out of conversations with, some other really intelligent friends. And they were like, oh, you should go do this. And then it was like one of those things that was in the back of my mind. And I thought
yeah.
about it for 3 months, 6 months. And I was like, all right, let's go do this.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. And it always seems funny because I feel like a lot of people think when it comes to starting a business that it's always like, okay, I woke up today and today, the day I was going to start a business, today was, and everything fell into place. And I mean, even if looking throughout history, when it's like inventions or Nobel prizes, it's always like it was an idea, and then over like 6 months, even sometimes like 10 years of like thinking about it, it's like eventually it started like the idea blossomed or kind of you unpacked it to finally figure out the business you want to start or the I guess in some like mathematical equations, like
mhm,
the
mhm.
math just appeared to them, but it's always a years and years of kind of working towards something. So it's interesting to hear your story as well because it's quite common to have like, okay, it's your friend says, and then you start hearing it again and again, and you're like, you know what, maybe I should take that step. And it, a lot of times in the moment, it seems like it was spur of the moment. But if you look back in history, it's like, oh, I thought about this 6 months ago, I had
Yeah.
a call with this person 3 months, and then it eventually comes to what it is. So you start working there, kind of developing your first start more on the consultancy side.
Mhm.
What are some of the differences? Because I know a lot of times when you're talking about entrepreneurs, it's very common to either have a consulting business or a product business, and you've kind of seen both worlds now. What are the biggest differences? Is it really just that upfront cost of having to sell a product, or are they much more similar than one would think between selling a product and selling your services as your knowledge?
Yeah. I feel like they're very different. Um, and I'll try to kind of conceptualize it. I mean, I think the big one is, right, there's that upfront cost. That's definitely a big piece of it. But the other thing was, this is more on the product side, right? When you're building a product for somebody else, like they're coming to you with the idea, in theory, they have all the answers, right? They're saying, this is how I want the workflow to be, or this is where I want the button placed, or, those types of things, right?
Yeah.
And with our consultancy, one of the things we did was we would push people to go talk to the end users, and we would work with them to do that. But still, at the end of the day, the customer who paid us, made the final decisions, right? Like, no matter what we suggested. Whereas when it's your own product, like, you don't have that fallback. You don't have that person to just be like, well, it's option A or option B, Mr. or Mrs. Client. What do you want? Now I'm creating option A and option B, but I'm also Mr. and Mrs. Client, right, to a certain degree. And we work with our users a lot, and we try to almost like make ourselves not the final decision maker, and do kind of involve our early users. But that was a big one that I kind of learned, over doing this Verb product. And then I think the other thing is, like, raising money is another thing. So we raised a pre-seed round. We're active. We just are about to close our seed round here, so that's coming up soon. And so there's just a lot more, involvement on that type of stuff as well, where you're generally not raising money for the consultancy, and that kind of goes with that upfront cost and stuff like that. But it's just, there's a lot more kind of balls in the air that you're juggling.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear both aspects, because I think a similar thing is with consultancy. There's a lot of times very low startup cost, but everyone can do it to some extent.
Yeah.
Everyone can say they're consultants. So there's a lot of competition on the marketing front to differentiate yourself and really sell yourself in a different way to really get ahead of other people. And you can see that with anything, whether it be business coaches or even anything you're looking at, like marketing consultant. There is thousands, and there's huge firms who do it, and there's also someone who's just graduated high school who's trying to do it as well. So it's such a different world. But a product is, I mean, there's obviously more upfront costs, but at the same time, there's still a lot of sales and trying to be different. It's just you're making those decisions now. When you were initially developing the product, was there and this is always an interesting how things can change over time. Did you have because you've worked with many different customers in the past, was there an ideal market you initially had, and then after iterations of working, you realized there was a new market? Or how did you because with data, there's so many different users, as we spoke about, like, sales, you have marketing, you have the data people themselves. Where was the main focus initially, and has that adapted as the business has grown over the past year and a half?
Yeah. Initially we took the stance of, our main focus is multi-tenant SaaS companies, right? So multi-tenant thinking, like, most SaaS software is multi-tenant, meaning if I'm a client of HubSpot and you're a client of HubSpot, both of our data is commingled in the database, so that when you view your data and it's presented back to you or to me, you obviously have to have security rules to make sure you only see your data and I only see my data. That's part of the complexity of doing data like analysis or dashboards when you have lots of different customers. Is there's that extra layer of kind of segmentation there. And so that's where our experience is in that multi-tenant SaaS space. So that's where we kind of started initially, is like, okay, multi-tenant SaaS, that's great. And we've actually gotten even more specific as we've gone on. So we've realized the people who need these types of dashboards that we can work with today are e-commerce businesses. So like a Shopify, right? They're obviously very large, but there's lots of other kind of e-commerce tools that are very niche, but they have lots of data and transactional information they need to share back with their customers. And the other side is kind of like workflow management. So we have a few companies that are in the procurement space. So, running RFPs for their customers, doing regulatory management, that kind of stuff. And those are very KPI driven. Like, we've got we have a sourcing event happening. We've got 10 responses. Here's all the results from the pricing and all that kind of stuff. So those are the two spaces that we've really honed in on, is the process management side, and then that transactional e-commerce side, because those are the ones that, frankly, their end users need the dashboard, and the dashboard shows the value of their platform, right? One of our big sales points when we talk to new customers or potential customers is, right, and I think everybody gets this, but like the dashboard is just as much for the customer to see performance as it is to show the ROI of your platform, right? To show the value that you're getting, that you're providing to like a stakeholder. So, we think of it a lot as a sales tool just as much as it is something that benefits end users or customers.
And I think, especially even through my career, dashboards have been such a dramatic difference in the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, before you would have a bar chart and that would be like very fancy in Excel. It's all you would need. But now there's, complexity. There's like pie charts are broken up. You can click through that. There's like so much more visualization of data that was never really seen in the past. And also how, I guess, I also would feel that the general public better understands data compared to generations prior. People understand a little bit what an average is or how you would work with it and some of the pitfalls of doing some bad data analytics. One thing every time I've ever looked at dashboarding software or that seen a lot of the other products is that there's always a challenging trade-off between being very simple and simplistic to use and hyper complex for those very data-driven data scientists who need to do a lot of those one-off or highly customizable. How are you able to kind of mix both of those worlds? Because I feel from a lot of times I speak to founders, maybe if they come from a very data heavy background, their platform sometimes is very ugly, but it's very powerful.
Right.
And you have the other side that's very pretty, but there's not a lot of features because those features are hard to educate. So I guess the question is where do you find the balance and how do you educate your users to kind of use your platform in general?
Yeah, definitely. We think of it as almost two use cases too, right? So that we kind of think of it as internal analysis and external analysis. The internal analysis is very much can be very much ad hoc or more like that data scientist-y kind of approach where it's like we're trying to discover insights, right? So discovery is a big part of that. On the external facing stuff, we don't think that discovery is as important to end users or even as used to end users, right? So if you're in sales, right, you're going to have a dashboard in Salesforce, in Sightly, whatever the CRM you're using, but you're not somebody who's going to be like discovering insights of like when my calls are more than 31 minutes, I'm more likely to have close the deal kind of thing, right? Yeah. You're really looking for a set of kind of charts that can work well for you, and you want to customize them a little bit or reorganize them. And so we think of what you present to your end customers as like massaged data, kind of, right? Yeah. So it's like you've done the heavy lifting, you've done the insights kind of work. Like most people are going to need to see these types of things. So we think of it as like it's part of the product, right? And so as part of the product, you need to think about what your end customer wants, what they're going to need, like what are they going to do with the data that you're presenting them. So that might be a bar chart, that could be a download into Excel, or that could be an API that gets pushed into their own CRM or something like that. So we think about it like, getting your customers pretty close to where they need. And then that's where the customization starts occurring. So you can do things like creating a library of different charts that they can use, or putting different options on a bar chart. So you can put different values on the x-axis, the y-axis, and things like that. But getting to like pretty simple customization, not the heavy lifting of customization. When we were doing research on this early on in 2020, we talked to a few people who had built their own like hardcore analytics experience for their customers. They spent like 6 months to 12 months building this thing. They implemented it and they've sold it like once or twice, right? Nobody wants to pay for it. They're like, there's no value in that for the end customer. They'll either just dump their data into Tableau or they just don't care enough to do it. So
Mhm.
it's kind of finding that balance. And that's how we think of it, is that
Mhm.
massaged kind of like get close and then give smaller pieces of customization that's less about the lifting and more about the fine tuning.
Mhm. I like how you broke it down versus like either trying to display data you already have versus trying to find insights. Because I think when it comes even working with a lot of small businesses, everyone wants a data tool because they're like, oh, we can find new, we can find these hidden things, and we have once it's just going to appear. But if anyone knows that, like anything with data, it's hyper complex to like get a data set and be like find out the outliers. It's not outliers are easy to find, but it's hard to find.
Mhm.
Like, okay, I have a data set of all my sales calls, what am I trying to look for? And that
Yeah.
is why there's PhDs and masters in data science, because it's so much more complex that I think it's one of those things where people assume they're going to do that.
Mhm.
It's like getting a gym. If you assume you're going to do it all the time, but realistically, where a lot of the value, especially is for the fast pace of tech or even in SaaS, is you just need to see what your data is telling you based on some parameters or simple
Mhm.
information. Those tidbits of information are so important because I've worked with a lot of organizations in the past where it was highly complex, and then you end up trying to do all these things, and especially for a small company, you have your data set's so small you really can't bring any useful insights or
Right.
without being like ask a sales rep and they're like, oh yeah, when I talk to this industry it works better, and you're like, okay,
Right.
that saved me thousands versus having to do this SQL and R searches to figure this all out.
Exactly.
uh,
There's when you're at some point, like artificial intelligence, the
mhm,
forecasting, the kind of trends stuff, like
mhm,
you really have to hit a certain level of data and frequency
mhm,
of new data to really make that valuable.
mhm,
Um, I think that's important. Also, just like one of the things that we think about a lot is um, like not just the dashboard, the
mhm,
representation of it, but the management of the data.
mhm,
And one of the things that we experienced in all of our kind of time was,
mhm,
right, software engineers are not data engineers. And I think that's
mhm.
something that's I think people are starting to see that today.
Yeah.
But, a software engineer is more like, um, a journalist, right? They're
Mhm,
good at writing sentences and the logic behind like
mhm,
syntax, right?
mhm,
But data engineer is more around the true mathematics
mhm,
around that. And those are two different things, right? You wouldn't ask a
mhm.
journalist to go solve a mathematical
Yeah.
equation and vice versa. But I think because a lot of people are kind of green in the space, they
Mhm,
automatically think, well, you're a software developer. You can go write, very efficient, great equations or
mhm,
transformations that you know will or SQL queries
mhm,
even, right? And that doesn't always work out well, and then
mhm,
you end up with like really slow dashboards,
mhm,
stuff that breaks all the time, that kind of stuff. And
mhm,
so we think a lot about that, as well as a lot of companies have software engineers, but they don't have data engineers. And so on the kind of data and data modeling
mhm,
side of things, we build the tools so that software engineers can kind of configure what a data
mhm,
engineer would do. So we kind of replace the data engineer, allow software engineers to kind of
mhm,
play that role a little more efficiently.
mhm. That comparison a lot reminds me a lot of the UX UI compared to like a graphic designer or marketer, where they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you work in UX, can you do some Photoshop for me?" And they're like, "That's not my job." But to like I mean, I've went to business school twice for my master's and my undergrad, and but from the business view, you're like, you work in design, can't you do all the design? Like,
Yeah.
why can't you? And they're like, that literally is my job. Like, I don't draw. Like, I do design thinking and developing. Like, it's this
Yeah.
completely different. But it's the same with like software engineers, front and back, and like if you just hear programming or any data, you're like, oh, it's all the same. But it'd be saying like an accountant, oh, can you
Mhm.
do sales? You're both in business, but that is no one ever does that because I
Yeah.
guess it's more common knowledge. But yeah, I've seen that trend as well with individuals, especially within like small to medium-sized companies, where if they're depending on how well they're connected, it's like you just assume because you've worked on a computer, you do some
Yep.
software, you can do everything. You understand how queries work and or other programming languages, but it's never the case. It's always a
Exactly.
funny learning curve once you get more into it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It's like when
mhm,
my parents call me to fix their Wi-Fi, and I'm like,
yeah.
I don't. I'm like, I design software. I'm a product manager. I have nothing to do with how Wi-Fi works. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, it's funny how I feel it's always no matter where you are in your life, you always make the mistake as an individual, but also it's like it's never going to end. There's always going to be like the next generation of technology or next generation of roles. Everyone will always end up grouping them together until it
Mhm.
becomes mainstream. But it's I remember thinking the same thing early on in my career. I'm like, oh no, I'm not like that. I understand how tech works. And then it was like the UI UX. I'm like, but aren't you just a graphic designer? And they're like, I went to school for this. This is completely different. I was like, okay, education. Okay, now I know there's a difference. But yeah. So as you started your business,
Mhm.
you started to work with more and more customers. Things started to grow. How how does did your how big is your team now? How many of
Mhm.
you how many of them are you in, and how do you look kind of going in the future? How does hiring work? Like, do you? It's always an interesting question. It's like, is there a revenue target? Do you focus on back end first and then sales? Kind of how did those discussions happen if we're kind of forecasting the future?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's so our team right now, we're 10 people,
Hmm.
pretty much all engineering and design. So I'm the only person that is not doing either of those.
Yeah,
So I'm doing everything besides designing and coding,
yeah.
and I do still do a little design. So the way we've structured our teams, and like I said, Oleg and I, we've been working together for a
Hmm.
while. A lot of the people we're working with are people that we've worked with, on and off for the
Hmm.
last almost 10 years.
Hmm.
So what's awesome is bringing on an employee that you've worked with in the past and seeing how they've grown and being able to kind of promote them through their career has been really rewarding for me. So we we actually do a lot of international hiring as well. So um, most of our development and QA stuff is based in Vietnam. So
Interesting.
we built a true team that's our full time team. It's not like we paid another
Hmm.
company, a consulting company. It's their employees. Um, so we have a group of 6 guys or people over there. Most of them are focused on front end engineering,
Hmm.
and they also do QA.
Hmm.
And then we do most of our kind of like strategic architecture and back end engineering that happens here in the U.S. and design is kind of all over the place. We have
Hmm.
people, a designer in Europe and then the U.S. So we think about it in a couple ways. One, we're very when we made the decision to hire in Vietnam, whatever 8 years ago for the
Hmm.
first time, a lot of it was motivated by costs. To be honest,
Hmm.
right? We were trying to build the consulting company, and we part of the plan was to be cheaper.
Hmm.
Um, but over time, we learned that we could do a really good job and have build really good products with this asynchronous communication, right? So
Hmm.
that's becoming more and more popular now. Everybody's remote and this
Hmm.
kind of stuff. We've been doing that for a while, and so when we're building a new team or adding new people, whatever it is, we've got a lot of that documentation that's already been prepped because everything we build, everything we kind of do is logged in some
Hmm.
fashion. And it's been cool, like the last 2 years, the amount of tools that have been built
Hmm.
to help that, enable that, has made it even easier than it was, 6, 7 years ago. So we do use a lot of tools like Loom and
Hmm.
obviously some task management stuff and Slack, obviously. But
Hmm.
so that's been really interesting over the last couple of years with Verb. As we think about hiring, um, it's definitely revenue target based. It's a little interesting. This is my first time raising like true VC funding, so
Hmm.
it's interesting to have a bigger chunk of change come in the door up front, so you can think about it a little differently. But you still have to plan, right? Like this
Hmm.
money needs to last us X
Hmm.
months, but really what that's supposed to do is how many customers are we going to get in 18 months? That's really what we have to show to our investors
Hmm.
is, all right, we need 100 paying customers in a year and a half from
Hmm.
from now, and to get there we need to add 3 or 4 more people, engineers,
Hmm.
marketers, et cetera, et cetera. So we think about it first at the revenue target. How many customers gets us to the revenue target? How do we build and support for that many customers?
Hmm.
So that's kind of how we've backed into our
Hmm.
planning around hiring.
It makes a lot of sense. It's always interesting when you get the money up front. It's like a reverse puzzle. You're like, okay, how
Yeah.
do I pay, get the money from to this create this accelerator. We're going to we need to make this much revenue working backwards. Like we'll need these many people. It's always like, it's an interesting puzzle that's always adapting. One thing you touched on that is always right now, obviously we're all working. Most of the year has been online work, and you've kind of been doing, you said you've kind of been doing it for a while, or at least you're used to this asynchronous work style. What are some of the takeaways? I mean, because you've done for years, what are some of the takeaways that were hard learnings that you think others maybe are learning now, or still aren't aware of, that you've had to kind of, through trials and tribulations of having that schedule, were able to take away that kind of made you more effective now? Because I feel even though we're working online now, there's still not a great understanding of how to manage teams remotely.
For sure. Yeah. My wife works in the bedroom behind me. And so we have such different styles. She works at a large corporate, tech company. It's very meeting driven. Nothing really happens without a meeting about, the meeting kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we're obviously the exact opposite. And so what I've learned early on, written communication was super important. And especially, so all the guys in Vietnam, they speak English very well. They're very intelligent guys, but there's lots of like colloquialisms. There's lots of stuff that can be like misinterpreted, not just if you don't speak English as your native language, but how many times have you written an email and somebody thought you were being a jerk, but you were just, just short, right? You didn't really put a lot of massaging in there. So one is like being very clear with your writing is very important. I think I've gotten my writing has improved a lot because of that. And thinking about, you write it down, but then taking their perspective and reading through it, and you'll see these little colloquialisms that you use that, like, if I'm from Vietnam, I'm not going to understand that, or I'm not going to understand that, and really stripping those out. So that's one thing I think, obviously more on the international side. What's really helped is we use Loom, the video kind of app that screen records and stuff, a lot. And that has been really helpful because it's not just about typing things out, which can still be misconstrued, but you can really get in there and walk people through stuff. So we do a lot of, even with our customers, when we want feedback from our customers on a new idea or new feature, we'll record ourselves with the screen, send it to them, instead of saying, hey, can we schedule a 30-minute meeting to talk about this one thing? And they're like, well, in 2 weeks from now, well, great. But if you send them a 5-minute video, they'll watch it, in between while they're eating lunch or in between meetings, and they'll give feedback right away. So we think about those types of things a lot, is like, how do we speed up the kind of like iteration sequence and the feedback sequence? And then documentation is super important. It's hard, especially as an early stage startup, when you don't have a lot of bandwidth and you're running really lean. But you have to find ways to kind of document stuff so that there's historical records of like why you made the decision you made, right? Especially in software like products, right? When you made this feature and you made the decision about this feature, why did you do that? And that's important so that in 6 months from now, when somebody else is looking at it, when you've brought on more people, you can understand that. So I think that's the big stuff, right? Is like those, but really like Loom has changed how we work even in the last year. And it seems so simple, right? Just recording your screen and yourself while you're doing it. But it makes documentation easy. It makes communication easier. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I think documentation is something that on the business, because I've only ever really worked on more the business side of the organizations, is something that I think the business world does very little of. Having worked in sales pretty much, when I would ask like, oh, why are commissions based like this? Or even like, why do we sell to these clients? A lot of times is, oh, because we've always done that way, or, oh, because my boss said it was the case. So a lot of times I feel like there would be so much better learning if it was like, these are our key targets. This is like some reasoning behind it. This is the date the decision was made. Just so when you, especially if you're a fast growing business, just so that there's some understanding of the methodology behind it. And then you can also fact check, like, has our customer base changed? Has the, if we're, 10% or 10 basis points above our competitor, now our competitors are more expensive. Now we can raise our prices. So I think that from a software side, it's so common. Like, well, obviously, what we're writing down, but on the business side, it's so much more, I'd say, free spirited with recording stuff. It's
Right.
always knowledge, but
Yeah. With on that also, I think, the act of writing stuff down or documenting, like makes you think clearer, right? Because there's a lot more logical kind of
yeah,
progression there. And so you might find gaps in your thinking, right? Or right when it's just a meeting, half the time nobody's paying attention, right? Or whatever, right? So like, you can share a document. So I like to, if I'm writing up some new process or new feature, while I'm thinking about it, I've got a Google Doc. I'm kind of like stream of consciousness kind of going. The next time I do that, next time I kind of come back to this process, I'm going to go and I'm going to clean it up. And then I'm going to share it with the team and say, here's what I'm thinking for this process. And it's like, maybe we need a meeting for it. Do you read this and then we'll decide if we need a meeting? Not let's have a meeting to talk about something we might not have had a meeting about. Right.
yeah,
And I think the documentation process both helps you like clean up your thinking, make sure you find holes, gives other people the time to digest. And then you can decide if you have a meeting or not. One thing I learned at Panera in the corporate world was some people are really good at thinking on their feet, and some people need time to just marinate, right?
yeah,
And it's like almost unfair to get into a meeting and present something because there's some people who are going to like be quick on their feet and they're going to be very vocal. And they're going to win a lot because they're just quick on their feet. Whereas like somebody who might need to marinate might actually come up with a better concept or a better idea, but because they need that like time to just sit with it, it doesn't happen a lot of times because it's expected to happen in the meeting right now, that kind of thing. So that's why I like to kind of do a lot of that pre-work. It makes it better, more beneficial for everybody. But I don't know if a lot of people do that. It feels like it's a lot of time intensive stuff, but it actually takes, removes the need for meetings. But
yeah. No, I think it's one of those things where it saves a lot of time, but it's like the upfront cost. It's like anything in life. Like working out is good for you in the long term, but right now you don't want to do it.
Right.
But once you do, you're like, oh, this was great. Like no one ever regretted a workout, and I think it's the same thing. And I've seen like one of the things throughout my career I've seen more and more is presenting stuff earlier to people, typically be even to see if we have to have a meeting or not. Because like typically be like, okay, I don't want to show it to my boss because it's just my train of consciousness or it's a document I'm working on. I've kind of not given up on this, but said, hey, I'm working on this doc. These are my ideas. Give it a quick, like a 2-minute run through just to look to make sure I'm not going off target. Because half the time they're like, hey, you missed this one, you missed this huge glaring hole. You don't see it. But to me, it's like, this is the issue. So if you had a meeting, the first 10 minutes would be like, yeah, this project is wrong. And you're like, okay, well, we have another
Right.
40 minutes booked. What are we going to do now?
Yeah,
And I think
exactly. With that, it's like iteration is so key, right? Like we talk about documentation, but in software, iteration is so common. Like that's how the whole like there's people have evangelized iteration, everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think everywhere that can be done. I think I take a very similar approach where it's like, don't be afraid to share draft one, right? I had a mentor who used to say something like, do it bad, do it better, right? You have to do it bad to be able to do it better. So but the first thing is just get pen to paper and get something out there so people can, and you just say, look, this isn't perfect. First version, just spend 3 minutes. We're going to save you an hour meeting or whatever it is. We're talking about meetings a lot, but like, I think the whole iterative process is missed a lot because people are afraid to just show work in progress and show like flaws and things like that. And I think there's actually a lot of value to that. I actually listened to an interview a long time ago with the head of Basecamp, Jason Fried, I think. And he was talking about how we don't teach iteration in school, at least in the US, right? Like you hand in you write an essay and you hand it in, right? It's not like first write an outline, hand that in, I'll give you feedback. Then write your intro paragraph, hand that in, I'll give you feedback, right? And it's like, there's never like the continuation of making something better. It's just do it and you're done. But that's not how the real world works, right? It's always step by step by step. And we don't really teach that. And I think it was a really interesting kind of insight that I picked up from that a long time ago. And I feel like it's something that we could all kind of use and teach our kids or our nieces and nephews or
Mm-hmm.
your whatever, whoever.
Yeah. I think it is the iteration process coming because I early on in my life thought I wanted to be a programmer, so I took programming for like 10 years between the ages of like 12 and like 22, and then I realized it's not just making video games; it's a lot more relatively dry. So I said I'm gonna go to business. This is
Yeah.
much more fun. Although kind of regretting now looking back, I wish I had some more dev skills. But there was just the mentality of like writing a line of code or doing something and then fix it, look for efficiencies after, and I think that approaching the business world, working with a lot of engineers, it was the same thing where it's the thought process of, okay, how can we improve just get something on paper and improve is a lot of times missed because I think it is, you're pretty vulnerable to say like, I don't really
Hmm.
know like, this is my idea. It's not perfect. And to tell someone to like tear it apart. But after a while, I think you just get used to it because then you realize other people are like, oh, he's at least, I can see their train of thought. I can see where they're coming from the idea with it. And then something else I start to do more and more, which is kind of funny. It's similar to cyclical, similar to like getting physical mail was annoying. Now getting emails annoying. Now mail's not. It's same thing as a lot of times with Slack. It's like you type to people. Now I just call people right away, being like, what are you trying to say? I don't
Yeah.
understand. What's going on? Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, now I understand. I'm good. So I started just picking up the phone because I know in the past, funny enough, early on in my career, they said if you don't talk to me, if you can send it an email, send it an email. Like, don't waste my time coming over to my desk. But now it's
Right.
the opposite. You get so many emails. You're like, just give me a call, so I don't have
Yeah.
to read 20 emails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think things always change like that. So, you're growing now. You're growing your team. Kind of, what does the future look for you
Hmm.
guys? Is it primarily focused in the States? Is it international? Kind of, how does the future look for the business? And I guess another side question is, had COVID changed anything? I mean, I guess you started during COVID, but
Hmm.
had that caused any differences? In my view, tech didn't really get affected as bad, but have you seen differences in maybe raising funding or at least working with customers now that they might be more remote?
Yeah, I mean, we started the very beginning of 2020, so we had like 2.5 months before
Hmm.
real COVID stuff happened, and at least in North America, I should say.
Hmm.
Um, and so it didn't really affect us too much. We were really nervous initially because we'd started having some like angel investor conversations,
Hmm.
but overall, it really didn't impact us. The software as a
Hmm.
service market has exploded, right?
Yeah.
So they actually did really well, which is fantastic because those are our end customers, which is great. Um, and then talking about like where we're going and how we're thinking
Hmm.
about growth, right? We're obviously hiring some roles to help
Hmm.
kind of continue building out our product.
Hmm.
It's still it's in a really good spot, but
Hmm.
we're iterating, right? So we're
Yeah.
continually growing and growing. And we're the way we're thinking about this in two kind of ways, right? We're really targeted on the SaaS market today, so
Hmm.
kind of keep going broader and broader out in the
Hmm.
SaaS market. So that's outside of the
Hmm.
U.S. and in Europe and
Hmm.
Asia and things like that. There's obviously some data things that we need to handle from GDPR and other
Hmm.
kind of rules there.
Hmm.
So there's some stuff to tackle on that side, and then also just moving up market. So we've traditionally worked and sold to large businesses, right? Large restaurant
Hmm.
chains and sports teams and things like that. So we do want to move up into large businesses as well. So we need to kind of build out that product, the core products, to be able to
Hmm.
move up market. And that's kind of how we're thinking of this. Um, but honestly, when we talk to investors, right, a lot of the questions come up as, well, where does this go? Who are you
Hmm.
acquired by somebody? What does this look like? And our real focus is building a really fantastic product for the market we're focused on today, which is SaaS
Hmm.
companies and e-commerce and process oriented
Hmm.
software, and then we're gonna figure it out from there, right? I think
Hmm.
we know that it's like the Mike Tyson
Hmm.
line. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, and so we're kind of directionally targeted towards enterprise SaaS and things like
Hmm.
that. But we know that we're gonna have hiccups along the way, or we're gonna
Hmm.
kind of pivot if we need here and there. So
Hmm.
loose plans like that, but
Hmm.
um, that's how we're thinking about it.
And it makes a lot of sense. I think it's one of those things that's so hard to plan for the future, especially in being such a dynamic dynamic world.
Mhm.
I guess last question, and this is a little bit different, is you said obviously you were in the band,
Mhm.
marching band. Did you find that experience helped you with business at all? Because I always find being an athlete or having some
Mhm.
experience within group settings always has some small learnings along the way. Did you find that experience bring any unique insights to the business world?
Oh man, that's interesting. Um, I never thought about it. I was always really busy, right? So I
Mhm,
played sports and did the band and all that
mhm,
stuff. So it was always kind of like trying to juggle all that stuff.
mhm,
Um, One thing I think is like you could tell who practiced and who didn't, right? Like it was very obvious, like who went home and did their scales and who didn't,
mhm,
or who read the sheet
mhm,
music. And
mhm,
I think one of the things is like those are character traits just as
mhm,
much as you know and so like somebody who's going to be very judicious about going home and practicing is probably going home and doing their homework, going home and
mhm,
making their bed, like all those things that like you're probably good at following the rules and things like
mhm,
that. And so there are nuggets you can kind of see about people's characters that you can extrapolate. And maybe I don't think that's like really judging a book by its cover, but when we go out to hire, especially when we're early stage startup,
mhm,
we don't have as much money as Google
mhm.
can pay the same kind of person.
Yeah.
So we have to go dig for people who might not have as much experience, but it might
Mhm,
extrapolate well to what we're doing, right? And so trying to find those character traits that will equal to a good
mhm,
developer or to a good
mhm,
product manager or marketer, et cetera. And
mhm,
so I think maybe that's one stretch of a thing that I've learned from
mhm,
that. Another is it's hard, it's hard to corral 200
mhm.
high school kids,
Yeah.
and so but everything always worked out, right? Everybody always got on
Mhm,
the bus, everybody made the plane, like
mhm,
it always worked out. And I think like um, I'm not somebody who over organizes for a company or over process
mhm,
engineers for a company, because I really do trust that like everybody does figure their stuff out. As long as you point them in the right direction, you give them the sheet music,
mhm,
you kind of give them the strategy,
mhm,
they will, if you hire good people, they will kind of figure that out.
mhm.
And when you see 200 kids in high school all getting on the bus and not getting lost, I think you can figure that you can kind of relate that, I guess, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's actually a pretty good answer for being thrown on the spot. But yeah, if people want to follow your story or kind of learn more about the business, what's the best way to where's your information located, and what's the best way to kind of follow the journey?
Yeah. So our website's verbdata.com. We have a blog there, post
Mhm,
kind of insights and stuff like that. And
mhm,
then, share on Twitter and LinkedIn. We're at Verb Data on both. So that's the big areas that we do. And you can find me on Twitter as well. I'm at dhurty at dirty. Um, if you
mhm.
ever want to see that, I don't really post too much, but a lot of it is retweeting Verb Data and then a little
Mhm.
bit here and there about product management and technology stuff.